morning. How's everybody? It is so nice to see you. Hello, those of you here in New York, and also those of you wherever you happen to be. I am reminded always when I travel, I know you're there, and all the people here in New York know you're there. So maybe those of you gathered here would turn around and say hi to all the people who are with us via computer. All right, now, for those of you here and perhaps elsewhere, please take this opportunity to introduce yourselves to the people who are around you, to your right and to your left and in front of you and behind you. All right, you ready? Anybody here tonight for the first time? It's always lovely to see people I have not seen before, as well as to see those that I have. You're very, very welcome. So let's do this. Let's take a deep breath and close our eyes. We see in the middle of our mind a little ball of golden light. And we watch this light as it begins to grow. Larger and larger until now it covers the entire inner vision of our mind. And we see for ourselves within this light a beautiful temple. We see a garden that surrounds the temple and a body of water that flows through the garden. We see that the inside of the temple is lit as well by this same beautiful golden light. And here we are, for we have been drawn together by the power and in the presence of God. We devote our time spent together, all of our relationships and experiences together, to Him. And we pray that God's most Holy Spirit be upon us, and we might thus be lifted above and beyond the turmoil, the chaos, and the fears of this world to the infinite love and peace that lay beyond. And so it is, together, we all say, Amen. Well, tonight is the second night of Passover, and Sunday is Easter. And we know that the Last Supper was, in fact, a Passover Seder. The spiritual dispensation of the 21st century, of this time in human history, does not have to do so much with new spiritual information, because in a very real way, there's not so much new spiritual information. Rather, it has to do with rescuing, as it were, the spiritual information that is contained in all the great religious and spiritual systems of the world, the universal spiritual themes that have been around for a very, very long time, that need, as it were, to be rescued from the very narrow and constricted doctrinal and dogmatic limitations that so many organized religions have impressed upon them. So A Course in Miracles, for instance, is not a religion. There is no dogma, there is no doctrine. It is a psychological mind training. So whereas the Course itself is based on universal spiritual themes, the power of the Course has to do not only with the text where you read about these spiritual themes intellectually, but the workbook where we actually go through the psychological training to make this material real and practical in our own everyday lives. When we then, through that mental lens, look back at all the great religious systems of the world, the heart leaps at the joy of seeing these same themes repeated over and over. It might be in Buddhism, it might be in the Old Testament, it might be in the New Testament, it might be wherever, in whatever spiritual or religious treatise, AA, Quran, whatever, you see these same basic themes. And these same basic themes are essential to both the story of Passover and the story of Easter, both of which I thought we could unpack a little bit metaphysically tonight. First of all, we know, of course, that Jesus was a historical figure. About Moses, perhaps he was, perhaps he wasn't. But as Jack Kerouac said when asked whether or not On the Road was true, he said, it's true even if it didn't happen. We do know there was a journey. This foundational myth, there was some real stuff in there. And it always feels to me like Moses was a real person. But in a very real way, that is not what matters most. What matters is the larger story. We do know that the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. We do know that. So let's talk about the story. Now, if you just see this as a story, then it will just have the effect of a story in your life. A story is a story. But, it's like I've never heard a Jew say they're not going to go to Passover Seder this year because I know the story already. And you don't hear about Christians whose reason for not going to church on Easter Sundays because they already know the story. That's the least of it. The story does not change. The issue is that we change. And we are changed by the story when we allow the story to penetrate us at very deep levels. If we only look at the external story, if we only look at the circumstances that imbue the story, then it is just a story. But if instead we recognize the great religious tales and those which involve the great religious figures of the human race as actual coded messages from God to us that go generation unto generation, carrying every generation that same coded, seeded message by which human consciousness, should we receive the message, is transformed, then the story becomes something else. It becomes more than abstract information. It becomes information in that it informs us at a very deep level. The Pharaoh, the Egyptian Pharaoh, enslaved the Israelites. Now, if you only look at this in a historical context, it's just a story. If instead you recognize that Pharaoh lives inside all of us, that the Pharaoh enslaving the Israelites represents whatever condition enslaves the children of God, which is all of us. It could be an internal condition in your life, it could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be social, it could be outer, economic conditions, it could be any kind of condition, outer or inner. But it is symbolized by the fact that you are enslaved. Pharaoh enslaves the Israelites. Now, Pharaoh was told by an astrologer that a child would be born, and that child would overthrow him, would ruin his rule. But the astrologer couldn't tell him, was this going to be a Jewish baby or was it going to be an Egyptian baby? Well, the astrologer couldn't tell the Pharaoh for sure, but could pinpoint the date in which the astrologer said the child would be born. And so Pharaoh sent out a decree, and that is that every child, Egyptian or Jewish, that was going to be born on that day was to be thrown into the Nile and drowned. Now, Moses was born on that day. And when he was born, the room was filled with light. And his mother, loving him as every mother loves her baby, was heartbroken at the thought she might not be able to save him from the Egyptian authorities. Ultimately, she realized that it was too risky. She probably would not be able to save him from the Egyptian authorities. And so what she did, as we all know, is she made a basket made of reeds that would be waterproof. She put it in the Nile, and the daughter of the Pharaoh, who herself was resisting this decree, found the baby. Jochebed, who was Moses' mother, kind of tricked the princess, did not reveal that she was the baby's mother, but suggested to the princess, perhaps you would take the baby. Part of the story that I love the most is that the princess, not knowing that Jochebed was Moses' mother, basically then took the mother as the baby's nanny. So Jochebed did, in fact, raise her child, although it wasn't revealed that she was actually his mother. Now, Moses, in other words, escaped. He escaped the destiny of the Israelites at that time. He himself was not a slave. He was raised in a palace. He did not have to relate to the suffering of his people. Now, we've talked before about Buddha and how similar this is to a theme in Buddhism. How Buddha was born, Prince Siddhartha. His father had him living inside the castle compound. He didn't have to go out there and start relating to the suffering of his people, yet his heart was restless. He escaped the compound, and we know what happened after that. Now, the same happened with Moses, in that even though his human circumstances separated himself from the destiny of those who were suffering the most, something in his heart was restless, something in his heart, and in the story of Moses, led him to, without any choice in the matter whatsoever, recognize the suffering of his people. And I think that that's something right there that all of us can relate to. You know, you're doing pretty good by definition if you're here tonight. Compared to what some people on the planet are going through as we speak, everybody here, even those of us who have the worst circumstances imaginable to us, are doing pretty good compared to some people in the world. And it is very tempting for all of us to say, well, I escaped. I know what's going on, but I escaped. Well, one day Moses was out, and there was a slave driver, an Egyptian slave master, and he was beating an Israelite slave. Moses saw this, and it angered him, it enraged him, and he then killed the slave master. When that happened, he knew he might be held accountable for that, so he went off. He escaped, and he ran away to the land of Midian. There he got married, and he had a child, and one day he was out tending his flocks. He'd become a shepherd, and one day he was out there, and he encountered the burning bush. Now, that's the second thing that makes you and Moses have something in common. You, too, have encountered the burning bush. How do I know that? Because you're here. Because what does that mean? Well, the interesting thing about the burning bush is that in reality, physical reality as we know it, if a bush is burning, then it ultimately burns out. But the burning bush continued. It burned continuously. In the Russian Orthodox Church, they refer to the burning bush as the uncreated glories, the uncreated energies, the uncreated glories. When you meditate, when you pray, whatever has taken you to the point in your life where you feel called, where you feel drawn out to something more. The word Moses means to draw out the Israelites from the land of Egypt, but also to draw out the people into their destiny as a nation of holy people. So the burning bush told him that God wanted Moses to go back to Egypt and to tell the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Now, once again, Moses had escaped. Moses was like, I made it out of there, although he had ultimately had to run. But he wasn't a slave. But something in him knew, yes, it is my business. One of the things that Islam and Judaism have in common that is different than Christianity is that the history of the people is inextricably bound up with the theology of the religion. But we're living at a time so that when the Muslim or when the Jew is thinking and contextualizing the spiritual journey, it is never just about me, it is about us, as in an actual people. But we're living now on the planet at a time where none of us can afford to contextualize our spiritual journey as just about me. Because at this point, if we don't make it, you're not going to make it, and I'm not going to make it. So that kind of collectivity is hallmark of the new spirituality, no matter what your religious or spiritual entrance into the conversation. Now, Moses said to God, when God said, I want you to do something great. I want you to save your people. God, speaking to him from the burning bush, said, I want you to save your people. Now, we've already discussed the fact that everybody here pretty much knows that you've escaped the worst of what's going on the planet. I mean, any of us are reasonable. We understand that the trajectory of human action, behavior, and interaction today on the planet is something that could absolutely spell catastrophe over time, whether it would have to do with a nuclear disaster or biochemical disaster, weather catastrophe, or whatever. But for the most part, we can rationally assume that it probably won't get too bad in our lifetime. We've basically escaped the worst of it, and so forth. We've already talked about that. We've already talked about the fact that we, too, have on some level been called to be more. You wouldn't be at a Course in Miracles lecture. You wouldn't be seeking, reading the kinds of things. You wouldn't be here unless something in you, if you weren't part of this thing that we all feel happening on the planet. And it has to do, we say it has to do with personal transformation, but it's so much bigger. It's personal evolution in order to be part of this collective evolutionary impulse that is our only chance for survivability and sustainability of the human race over the next 100 years. Now, Moses said to God, when God told him, I want you to go back, I want you to save them, I want you to tell the Pharaoh that he's just not allowed to do this anymore, and we're going to save our people. And Moses said to God what probably you have said in one way or another. What, me? No, not me. I so do not have what it takes. Maybe you have somebody else in mind, but not me. Now, we've already talked here. It's not just personal, it's collective. What happens when you have the personal savior figures? Well, socially and politically, they tend to shoot them. Whether it has to do with Martin Luther King or Bobby Kennedy or anything, that can't be the revolutionary impulse of this moment. It's not about soloists, it's about a choir. You can shoot a soloist, you can't shoot a song. This is like all of us. This is not the zeitgeist of this moment of saying, she'll do it or he'll do it. It's we'll do it or it will not get done. So Moses says to God, I don't think I'm your man. I don't think I have nearly what it takes. The first response of God was to rebuke him. How dare you doubt my choice? If I say this is your job and I have chosen you, it is impertinent for you to doubt God's choice. Why not you? You know, this is where the Course in Miracles says we have all thinking on this planet is upside down, 180 degrees away from the thinking of God. And arrogance and humility are an example. Remember, we speak often how the Course in Miracles tells us that those on this earth who've achieved the most have achieved a fraction of what each and every one of us is capable of. So there's none of this, no, not me, I don't have what it takes. Moses tried that. God first rebuked him for his audacity in doubting God's choice. And secondly, God explained to him how he was going to compensate for whatever weaknesses he might have. First of all, Moses stuttered. And that's a symbol for we all have something. Right? We all have some reason to say, well, it certainly can't be me. Maybe you haven't noticed, God, but I blank. Whatever it is. With Moses, it was I stutter. I don't have the resume. I'm not the right age. They won't let me. Whatever it is, we all have something. To the issue of the stutter, God told Moses that he would send his brother Aaron to speak for him. And the third thing is that God told Moses that he would send him all the power that he needed in the form of a rod. Now, the rod of Moses is very interesting. It is analogous to Merlin's wand. And from a metaphysical perspective, it is your word. Your word, when spoken. The rod, it was a snake that Moses was afraid of. It's your power. It's your Shakti. It's all this power that you have, that you know you have, but when it is undisciplined and it is not used for God's purposes, it scares you, and probably the people around you, more than it serves you. And that's where most of us are. I see it every time we give a lecture. We all experience it in our own lives. You know, the issue when you mess things up, when you sabotage, when you self-sabotage, when you undermine yourself, when you mess up an opportunity, it wasn't that you didn't have power. I remember saying to myself many years ago, I must be very powerful to screw up so consistently. So it's not that we don't have power. It's the power is usually that which would be symbolized by the snake, which could do more. Interesting, the idea of a snake that you see after you have in some way misused your power. God told Moses, pick up the snake by its tail. And when he followed God's commandment, pick it up. In other words, take it from that which is down on the ground. That's what the snake is. It's powerful, but it slithers on the ground. And that's why it's dangerous. We are not meant to be the snakes. We are meant to be the angels who have wings, who are meant to be of the sky and not of the earth. God commanded Moses to pick up that snake by the tail, at which point it turned into his rod. And that's our spiritual power. That is the power that Martin Luther King referred to when he said, you have within you a power more powerful than bullets. And that is when we speak our word and we speak with conviction. We speak often here about the fact that the Course in Miracles says miracles are born of conviction. Evil is born of conviction as well. We talked about the fact that terrorists have conviction. The problem, as we've spoken often, is not that more people on the planet hate than love. Not at all, I don't think. It's that those who hate today hate with decided conviction and seriousness, and they speak their word and do what it takes. The problem is that more conviction today is being displayed by those who hate in too many cases than is currently being displayed by those who love. In other words, we are being told, pick it up, pick up your power, because you are on this earth to save your people. Now, at that point, Moses has the rod, and throughout the story of the Exodus, throughout the story of the journey of the Israelites, as long as he held the rod high, the Israelites were victorious, and whenever he would be, it was too much stress, it was too much burden, it was too heavy for him to bear, and he would drop it, then the Israelites would be defeated. And at one point, one of the stories is that Moses is tired and it's heavy and he can't do it, and Hur comes on one side and Aaron comes on the other, and they help him hold it up. And isn't that what we're all like sometimes? I want to be positive, I want to believe in myself, I want to atone, I want to take responsibility, I want to forgive other people, but it's just too much for me. And that's when your friends call. And that's when you go to a support group. And that's when somebody supports you in getting it right. Because if your thoughts are held high, you will be victorious. Well, Moses goes to Pharaoh. He's got his rod, he's got his brother, he's got the whole thing, and basically starts communicating with the Pharaoh that God has told him to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. This is the story of Passover. All our Jewish friends who are and family who are at Passover Seders tonight or last night, read the story, let my people go. Let my people go. And what is the bondage today? The bondage today on the planet, and we have actual slaves on the planet as well. Still, slavery, abject slavery, has actually not been eradicated from the planet. But there are many different forms of slavery. And externally, all the forms of slavery, the economic slavery, the various forms of injustice, are slavery to the ideas of brute force, militarization, and so forth. Militarism, not just militarization. So, Pharaoh said to Moses pretty much what you would expect him to say, no. Moses goes back to God. He says, well, I did tell him. God said, you told him? He said, yeah, I told him. And he said, no. So God said, go back and tell him I'm sending locusts. And there were 10 things, and there was blood in the Nile, and there were frogs, and there were all these horrifying things, the 10 plagues. And you know, as these plagues continued to accumulate, by the 10th time God had it, and he said, you tell him, I am going to kill the Egyptian baby, the firstborn Egyptian baby. That is when God told Moses to say to the Israelites, and this is the meaning of the Paschal Lamb, the Passover. What does Passover mean? They were told to take the blood of the Paschal Lamb, put it on their door. Put it on their door, and God would know to pass over. Remember the Paschal Lamb, because that Paschal Lamb will reappear in the form of Jesus in the next story. So that is the story of the Passover. The angels are to pass over the house to know that those babies are not to die. That scares the Pharaoh, and he said, take your people and go. Moses high-foots it out of the palace, and he says to all the Israelites, we can go. Come on, now. We're going now. And don't worry. And they said, well, we can't because the bread's not leavened. It doesn't matter. 2,000 years from now, they'll call it matzah. People will sell it at deli they'll actually like. Right? Now, this is another thing that any of us can relate to. Did the Israelites say, oh, thank you, Moses? Did they say, wow, we've been delivered by God, and we're going to no longer be slaves to whatever your internal or external condition? Is that what they said? No, they didn't. They said the exact same thing you and I have said in our lives, which is, no, wait a minute. It might not be perfect, but I'm functioning. I mean, I wouldn't call myself free, but what is it you want me to do? You want me to go where? To a promised land. And where is this, may I ask? And we're going to go, into the desert, are we? Like there are roads there? And is there a way to the promised land? Oh, God's going to tell you? So Moses was not appreciated. And how often is this not true for us? That we know that our lives are not exactly what they could be, but when we're told, surrender to God, make your life completely in God's service and just trust God and use the rod that God has sent you, use the power of Moses that is within you, and go out into that territory. Yes, you do not know what it looks like. You do not know what it will be like. You do not know how to get to this promised land. Surrender completely. How many of us can honestly say, oh, okay. No, we say things like, well, I got to figure this out. Moses could not figure out where they were going to go. There are no roads in the desert here that we're talking about, right? And we say, no, I got to strategize it. I got to figure out how I'm going to make money in the meantime. I got to figure out, I don't know. That sounds a little like, what do you mean surrender completely to God? And thus began the journey. And that journey through the desert did take that symbolic 40 years. Just like the crucifixion to the resurrection is that symbolic 3 days, and not just symbolic. And it's an important period of time because all of us have our time when we wander in the desert, and all of us have our time where, having been crucified, we go through that journey from crucifixion to resurrection. But the significance of the story, and the reason that we are reading about these stories this week, the reason we are allowing these stories to penetrate our hearts, to really allow ourselves to be penetrated. Do you know, there's a lot of talk about why is God referred to as he and all of that, the gender stuff. But you know, in the Eastern religions, they also talk about masculine and feminine, yin and yang. And yin is the feminine, earth aspect, and yang is the masculine sky aspect. So to the extent to which God is seen in masculine terms, human consciousness is the feminine, the soul is feminine. Take this stuff in. Whenever people say to me, when they're just starting the Course in Miracles, and anybody says to me, do you have any suggestions or advice? I always say the same thing. Take it personally. Take it personally. Don't keep it up there. It means very literally what it's saying. It's about you. Now, not long after the Israelites had been gone from Egypt, they came to the Red Sea. And at that point, that was at the very point that the Pharaoh, symbolizing that ego mind, decided that it wanted its slaves back. We've all been there, right? You thought you were getting over something. You thought you were doing better. Could be in recovery, or doesn't have to be external recovery, something where you think, I got that habit handled, I'm going to be better, and then it brings you back. Oh my God, I'm doing it again. And that's what the Pharaoh did. Pharaoh said, I want my slaves back. He sent his soldiers out to get them. At about that point, the Israelites are standing in front of the Red Sea. If they go forward, obviously they'll drown if they just go into the sea. But the Pharaoh's soldiers are coming up behind them. And the Pharaoh's soldiers, if they turn back around, will either take them back to slavery or kill them. What happens then? Once again, allow yourself to recognize, and drink in and allow the enormity of the message being given here. God told Moses to take his rod, put it up like this, and to start walking into the water. And to get all to the point, now that's an act of faith here. Man, you're walking into the water. I don't care how good a swimmer you are, you're walking into the sea. But he's holding his rod high, and just at the point when the water gets here, and that the message there is the level of faith he had to have, to just go, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking, and at that point, the Red Sea parts. Miracle. That's what these stories are about. They are about miracles. They are a message from God. Do what I tell you to do, and anything that needs to happen to support your deliverance, even unto the complete transcendence of the laws of time and space as you know them, will occur. If you remain outside the identity of your relationship to me, and you remain outside the context of your deepest conviction and deepest surrender and deepest devotion being that you are of service to me, then things aren't going to work so well. And that is the whole point. The Course in Miracles says that you are heir to the laws that rule within the world you identify with. So if you only identify with the mortal world, and you only identify with mortal circumstances, and you only identify with your slavery, then the laws of scarcity and chaos and death will be true in your experience. But when you instead place yourself within the context of having received the message from God, having encountered the burning bush, having recognized, yeah, I escaped, but not everybody else did, and I'm on this earth to be part of the collective Moses, the collectivity of the Christ, the collectivity of salvation, that each and every one of us, it is defined in the Course in Miracles as the plan of the teachers of God. And the plan of the teachers of God, the Course in Miracles says, who are the teachers of God? Anyone who chooses to be one. Everyone is called, but few care to listen. That's the meaning of the concept of the chosen. The chosen doesn't mean some people are called. It means everyone is called, but few care to listen. So we are all sent. Some sent into the arts, some sent into education, some sent into law, some sent into the healing arts. Some are sent to North America, some are sent to Europe, some are sent to Africa, some are sent into this race, this ethnicity. The point is that as we allow ourselves to be teachers, i.e. demonstrators, i.e. miracle workers, then that means that wherever we stand, because our consciousness is imbued by this ecstatic impulse, which the rod gives you, that you actually meditate and you pray. It's just like when you do yoga, you build your musculature. We have flabby attitudinal muscles. The Course in Miracles says you achieve so little because you have undisciplined minds. When you pick up your rod, that means I will not be negative, I will be positive. I will act in faith, I will atone for my mistakes, I will seek to take responsibility for my life, I'll recognize it when I made a mistake, I'll try to atone, I will try to make amends, and I will seek to have mercy and forgiveness towards others. This makes us strong attitudinally, gives us the muscles of attitudinal, emotional, and psychological power. And then wherever you are, you have an influence, you have a subtle influence. Now, when Moses stood before the Red Sea, and you in your own life, there are Red Seas in your own life. Now, one of the things about Moses in front of the Red Sea, there were other people with him, but they did not have the power to part the seas. Just like Jesus, somebody crucified to his right, somebody crucified to his left. We are not told that they resurrected. It was the consciousness of Moses. It was the consciousness of Jesus. Now, in time, not too long after that, several years after that, I think, Moses was called up to Mount Sinai. And there, where he did not speak, he did not eat or drink for 40 days, he was then given by God the 10 Commandments. He was to write with the finger of God onto those tablets. And he was to go back down to the people of Israel, and they were to be told that these were the message that God wanted to give them, the way he wanted his people to live. Now, here in the higher consciousness community, and not just in the higher consciousness community these days, it seems to me that all over the place, there is a lot of talk about what God will do for you, but too little talk these days about what God expects from us. We talk a lot, about how we've been told this kind of faux spiritual paradigm where God's basically your errand boy. If you journal it and write down exactly what you want, you can bring it and you can make it happen. You turn God into your errand boy. That's magic, the Course says. It's not even that it's bad, but it's certainly nowhere near the spiritual mountaintop. The spiritual mountaintop is not where you tell God what you want him to do for you. The spiritual mountaintop is you place yourself in service and ask how you can be there for God. Same with Jesus. It's not like just believe in Jesus, everything will be okay. To believe in Jesus means to believe in that Christ which is within us all, and from that emerges the law to love one another. So what we have is a world where people say they believe in God and yet are forgetting the part about what God has given us, whether it's in the 10 Commandments or whether it's in the injunction to love each other or whatever it is. Even in the 10 Commandments, and I talk about this in my book, Tears to Triumph, if you look at the 10 Commandments from a metaphysical perspective, these are not just some quaint, 1,000-year-old silliness, exercises in silliness. Let's take a couple that we might be tempted to talk about that way. Honor thy father and thy mother. Well, this was thousands and thousands of years ago, because this was thousands before the birth of Jesus, right? All right? We now know you're not going to get clear in your life. It's not going to work for you if you don't get clear with your parents. Hello? Do not commit adultery. Now, if you look at it only in terms of married people and all of that, we may or may not, whatever your stuff is. However, if you look at it metaphysically, it means don't have sex outside a sacred context. And guess what? Any adult here actually knows that's a pretty good idea, because outside sex being within a sacred context, you get love addiction, love avoidance, you just dated a sociopath and didn't know it. All the different diseases and dysfunctions and syndromes of modern life and modern dating. Why? Because we don't have any sense of deep ethical connection and deep real sense of sacred meaning to what happens when you have sex with another human being. So when you look back at these laws, and you look back at all of these stories from way, way long ago, you realize they are eternal coded messages. Now, Moses did not make it into the promised land. Don't know quite how that works, because he supposedly lived to be 150 and it was a 40-year trip. So I don't know exactly how he didn't make it. But we know that he didn't actually get to enter into the promised land. And it was Joshua, who was born in the desert. Interesting. Joshua, who was born in the desert, who then led the Israelites into the promised land. And God said to Joshua during that journey, do not be afraid. I am with you. I am with you wherever you go. And we know that it was very common when people were being marched into the gas chambers, or I think what Sean Spicer would call Holocaust centers. Knocked me out of my bubble, didn't it? I apologize. when the Jews were walking into the gas chambers. Many are known to have just kept repeating over and over again, because by that time most of them knew where they were going and what was going to happen when they went in, and were known to have repeated over and over again, "Do not be afraid, I am with you, I go with you wherever you go," which were the words of God to Joshua. One of the metaphysical interpretations of the fact that Moses was not able to enter into the promised land was that he still had a memory of the slave condition. And your mind must be made new. And you see this in a parallel concept now when we move into the story of Jesus, when the angels told the women not to look for the body is gone, the body is risen. So before we look into the story of Jesus, let's just talk about the basic universal spiritual theme here of both the Old Testament, the story of the Exodus, as well as the story of Jesus. One of the things we talk about here is how the universe is intentional. The acorn is already programmed to become the oak tree, and the bud is programmed to become the blossom, and the embryo is programmed to become the baby, and all of us are programmed to be the men and women that God would have us be. Once again, infinite potential. The problem is that unlike the acorn and unlike the bud, you and I have the capacity of free will. We have the capacity to say no. We do not have to follow that natural intelligence. We do not have to follow the words of God. And for many of us, you heard, a lot of times people say, "I don't know what God is saying." And what I find in talking to people, and I've certainly seen it enough in my own life, the problem is not usually that you didn't hear what God was saying. It's that you didn't like what God was saying. You were afraid of what God was saying. I can't tell you how many times people say, "Well, I'm trying to figure out what to do." And from A Course in Miracles perspective, just close your eyes and ask. And then how often I get the answer, "Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out." That's not what I said. The Course in Miracles is about actually taking direction, to know that we are led and guided by an internal teacher. The idea here is that when we do that, the Course in Miracles says God's plan works and yours doesn't. The reason our lives are not working is because we're not being the people God would have us be. The reason this planet is in trouble the way it is because we are not being the people that God would have us be. But we don't say that with dogma and doctrine and all of that stuff. We just say that from a very simple place. Our love for each other is supposed to come first. And instead, we are a nation of whores. We are a world of idolaters. We put money before humanitarian concern. Who are we kidding? We talk about a red line with some children who were gassed. As awful as that is, our red line should be that 12,000 children starve on this planet every day. Why isn't that our red line? Why isn't that our red line? Well, when you look at the money to be made from Tomahawk missiles, it's very different than the no money to be made from actually dealing with the fact that so many children are starving on this planet. The Course in Miracles says that love restores reason and not the other way around. We are moving in an unreasonable direction. Now, why is Jesus called a savior? Well, when you look at all this metaphysically, the only thing to be saved from is our own insanity. Everything that's happening on the planet, whether it has to do with an out-of-control arms race, whether it has to do with nuclear bombs or chemical warfare or weather catastrophe, the problem is not environmental degradation. The problem is the insanity that would make anyone be willing or even interested in harming the planet. The problem is not nuclear bombs of themselves. The problem is why anyone would ever even want for them to exist, much less use one. The problem is the insanity within us. And that's why the notion of salvation, first of all, you start with the Old Testament, that no matter what the problem, God has an answer, God sends a person. The issue from A Course in Miracles perspective, as I said before, is the collectivity of the Moses impulse, that all of us, to the extent to which we devote ourselves. The Course in Miracles says, who are the teachers of God? Who are the Moses archetype? Whoever allows ourselves to be used, to the extent to which we say, "Dear God, use me. Use my hands, use my feet." And the Course in Miracles says, all of us are special and none of us are special. The Course in Miracles says that obviously within the space of our human experience, some of us are more talented in some areas than others. We all know that. But remember, God will send you a rod. God will send you Aaron. And God is not incorrect in his choices. When we say, I just want to be used, I know that the world is in trouble, quote unquote, my people. So Moses thought of it as the Israelites, we think of it as the entire human race. My people are in trouble, and I give myself to God that I might be used. And that's why our lives aren't working. Our lives aren't working because we have been taught this false doctrine that it's all about you. And we talk here many times, about how the cancer cell is a cell in the body that has forgotten. It's gone insane. It is disconnected from its natural intelligence. And instead of working to collaborate with other cells in order to serve the healthy functioning of the whole, it instead goes off to do its own thing. That's called cancer. It is a malignancy. It is a malignancy in the body, and it is a malignancy in consciousness. And that's what's happened to the human race. We have been infected with a malignant consciousness. That is what ego is. That is what Pharaoh symbolizes. It's a malignant consciousness. Now, Jesus was a Jew, and the Last Supper was a Passover Seder. Now, in A Course in Miracles, we are taught that the Christ is in all of us. That, as Jesus says in the Course, I don't have anything you don't have. The difference between us is I don't have anything else. He says in the Course in Miracles, I am in a state which is only potential in you. Now, we've already talked about how the Israelites were definitely confronted by the murderous challenge of the Pharaoh's soldiers, but that God created a tunnel in the Red Sea so that they could make their way through. Also, a beautiful part of the story is that once they did, the prophetess Marianne was there, and who was Moses' sister, and led them in song. And that's the song of Marianne means the song of freedom, when you realize, I got over this. I'm going to be okay. I'm not stuck in that same state of slavery that I was before. Jesus, you're talking about the continuation of these stories. They all dovetail into each other. So Jesus stands within a situation, obviously, what could be more of an intense and murderous symbol of the ego's power than the torture and the murder of an innocent man who had hurt no one and helped many. Now, don't think of this as a symbol, and don't think of it as far away, and don't think of it as somebody else's life. What do we know about alcoholism? It's not just out to inconvenience you, it's out to kill you. What about drug addiction? It's not just out to inconvenience you, it's out to kill you. What is happening with so many of the bombs and the craziness on the planet today? It's interesting about the higher consciousness community, because when it comes to things like drug addiction and alcoholism, we have a very sophisticated understanding. The New Thought movement, higher consciousness community, does tend to be pretty sophisticated in its understanding about recovery issues, because there's so many people in recovery. But they really get that when you're talking about drugs, if you don't get this right and it's immoderate and you're an addict, this could kill you. Enough people have died of overdoses that we all know. This could kill you. And when it comes to alcoholism, the same thing. You've been around enough to know, hey, man, if you don't get in control, this could kill you. But the New Thought movement is still keeping the blinders on about all the other threats to the planet, which, if we don't get it right, would kill you. And so the same kind of adulthood and the same kind of sobriety and the same kind of maturity and consciousness that it takes to really be there to intervene with an individual who has gone so far in the wrong direction that it could kill them, that's exactly what we need now. We need to be a collective intervention. Humanity needs an intervention. Now, that intervention means a collective field of consciousness which acts as a disruptive element. But even though, disruption has become kind of a cool term and everybody wants to be a disruptor, too many times when people talk about how they want to be a disruptor, if you actually look at it, it's just moving some furniture around. It's not really disrupting on the kind of fundamental level that will probably get you some anger on the part of somebody, which probably means you're doing the right thing. Once again, they didn't like Jesus either. But the Course in Miracles says that he is not asking for martyrs. He's asking for teachers. And to teach is to demonstrate. So what Jesus demonstrates is that even though the worst craziness, the worst insanity, the most murderous impulses of the ego mind, which is symbolized by crucifixion, was not only thrown at him, but even succeeded to the extent of destroying his physical body, because his consciousness was one with the Christ, which is the truth of who he is, the truth of who we are being, eternal beings. The Course in Miracles says that your physical birth was not the beginning, but a continuation. Your physical death is not the end, but a continuation. The true self is birthless and deathless, as they would say in the Eastern religions. And to the extent, what did we say before? You are at the effect of the rules that prevail within the world you identify with. If you identify with the realm of the crucifixion and the circumstances, they will be true for you. What the Old Testament is saying is God will heal the circumstances. What then Jesus said, no, it's not better or the other. The Jews have their covenant. The story of the Israelites is a covenant. Jesus put on the door, there's one room, many doors. So it's not like one is better than the other. Jesus is one name, the Course in Miracles says, on the door. Because the name Jesus, the Course says, in any language automatically reminds the mind of the relationship between the Father and the Son. So if you say Jesus, and this is where you get the metaphysics of the meaning Jesus saves. The word itself is a Shakti. The word itself has ecstatic impulse. So the word itself, Jesus spoken in any language, and it helps realign you. It's like a chiropractic adjustment. We are unaligned. We have been fed this belief that we are these little bodies separate from each other and very powerless in this world. That is not who we are. To say that you are, that the Christ lies within you, means that the truth of who you are cannot be crucified. The truth of who you are. We talk all the time about how, you're not, I think Wayne used to say it, you're not a spiritual, no, you're not a human experience, not a human being having a spiritual experience, you're a spiritual being having human experience. What does that mean? What that means is that anything is possible. What that means is that the past does not exist. What that means is that you cannot die. Once again, to take this week and to just even to the smallest degree, any degree you can, allow yourself to embrace the enormity of this. To embrace that if God needs to part the Red Sea, he'll part the Red Sea. If somebody comes at you, and you dwell in the consciousness of the Moses or the consciousness of Jesus, with Moses, it was the realization of the law. It is the realization that we are to be the people that God would have us be. And he says, through Moses, I will make of you a nation of priests. And that was spoken to the Israelites, but now the message of the Israelites, as it always is with the Jews, in metaphysic tradition, it is said that the Jews are God's lending library. Any message for any people is actually meant for all people. And so then this dispensation, emerging out of that, Jesus being a Jew, that the consciousness lies in all of us, wherein the complete nullification of all non-loving circumstance occurs in your life and for you. And that is why you, working with conviction, and you working in dedication, and you working in devotion, become part, if you so choose, if you make this the story of your life, that you're not just out to get what you think you want for your needs to be met, that will happen automatically. As you place yourself in service, then what happens is that we will disrupt. We will intervene. We will turn the ship that's headed towards the Titanic around. Because when enough of us are lifted in consciousness to where Moses was, that in his presence the Red Sea parted, where Jesus was, that in his presence the crucifixion turns into resurrection, then we too, not like, oh, they could do it and we can't. Their doing it was meant to be a lesson and a message to all of us, you can. Not because of your own power, but because of the power of God that lives within you. And the Course in Miracles says that you're thinking you're humble by saying, oh, I could never work miracles. That's actually not humble, that's arrogant. Because it suggests that God must not have made you. And also, as God said to Moses, who are you? Who are you to think that my decision is wrong? To really understand the enormity of that is to really allow ourselves to embrace what Easter can mean for all of us. Now, after Jesus dies and his body is put in the tomb, 3 days later, the women who had been around him go to retrieve the body. And they go to the tomb, and an angel is standing there. And an angel says, I don't know why you're here. Don't look for him. He is not here. He has risen. Now that is so profound, because what that means is that these wounds that we all have, these weaknesses that we all have, these things we're all working through, yeah, I'm working on that, I'm processing that. And we do have to process, ladies and gentlemen, but it was supposed to be 40 years, not 120 years. It was supposed to be 3 days, not 6 months, 6 years, 3 decades. At a certain point, you get off the cross. At a certain point, you make that decision and you make a break from your slave condition. You know, the thing about your slave conditions in life, your all poor me story, you know what my hope for all of us is that it become as boring to you as it probably already is to those who hear it over and over and over. This keeps us small. This keeps us small. We cannot afford to be small. We cannot afford to be small. We must become the people. You know, if we hear it one more time, be the change. We now actually say be the change instead of being the change. We need to be the change. And be the change means to rise. Jesus didn't say, I have fixed everything. He said, I have overcome. Be of good cheer, I have overcome. And the first place we overcome is in our own lives. And we all have stuff. But you know, the problem that we make, that we continue to perpetuate, is that somehow we're thinking that once I become an enlightened master, then I will join the great crusade of God to save the planet. That's why I love to read biographies, because when you read biographies of people who've done great things, they were just like us. You know, there's a story, there was a lot written about Lincoln's melancholia, right? And there are a lot of eyewitness accounts about how, because they thought the Civil War was going to last for like 6 weeks, right? 600,000 people died. 600,000 people died in the Civil War. I remind you that 257,000 died in World War II. And think how much smaller the country was. And when Lincoln's secretary would come into his office and tell him of the latest figures of how many people had died in a battle in the Civil War, several people spoke about how he would take his head in his hands and he would rock back and forth and say, I cannot bear it. I cannot bear it. And that's such an image to me that represents the fact that you don't wait till you're beyond caring or beyond crying or beyond having issues before you sign up and get real. And get that if Moses can do it, that's not just about Moses, it's about all of us. It's an archetype, yes, but that we are to live within. And when Jesus said, greater things than I have done, you will do. When he said, I don't have anything you don't have, I just don't have anything else. He says, prove that I did not, this is the line in the Course in Miracles, prove that I did not die in vain by proving that I did not die. And proving that I did not die means, as we're taught as Course in Miracles students, that he has become one with the atonement. He has become one with the Holy Spirit. And for those who feel called to him, he is a name for the internal teacher within us all. In the Course in Miracles, this is very literal. You wake up in the morning and you say, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? And that natural intelligence within you, which goes among other names by the name of Jesus, will direct you very specifically. Like I said, it's not that you don't know what the voice is saying, it's that you're not in the mental habit of asking. And even when you hear, you sometimes go, I know I've done this many times. God, I heard that answer, but I'm not sure you really have considered all the facts. And so I'm going to give it another few days, because I think if I ask again. And so we are limiting our capacity. So to say that Jesus is a savior, what does that mean unless it's actually saving us from our own craziness? And what does it mean if it doesn't save us from the craziness of the collective at this time? There is no time in human history, no time in human history where the collective insanity of the human race posed such a collective threat to the survival of our species. We need to get this. It's like an alcoholic who's in denial. You don't get this. It's like the drug addict who's in denial. You don't get this. And there's a way in which perhaps many of us, or many people on the planet anyway, are in denial. And we're in denial because we're afraid to go there. We're afraid if we look at the dangerous conditions on the planet, we'll get depressed. Of course we'll get depressed. If you're not depressed, what, you're not looking? Or I'm too empathic, or whatever. I believe that we are all empathic and we are all sensitive creatures. And our recognizing that the crucifixion today, not just that it's not just one man, and that it's you as well. But it's also not just you, it's us. We are living on the cross in the human race. We are living a condition where there are so many ways in which, if you look at it just from a rational perspective, we are headed to the probability of global catastrophe on a scale that no one has ever even imagined before within the next 50 to 100 years. And so when we consider the possibility, and that's the Course in Miracles says, salvation begins when you consider the possibility. You consider the possibility that there might be another way. And when you have stories like the parting of the Red Sea, when you have stories like Moses striking the rock, and that's what brought forth water, when you have the stories of God will speak to you from the burning bush, and God will lay down the law in your life, and God will tell you what he expects of you, and God will take care of you, and he will be with you wherever you go. And you will enter the promised land. And you will minister. And yeah, the world will throw stuff at you, but they're not going to kill you. Jesus did that. We don't need you to do that. But you will be part of this collective resonance by which this shall be overcome. You know, even on the death part, Martin Luther King said, if you haven't found a cause worth dying for, you don't have a life worth living. The kind of disruption, the kind of ecstatic impulse to really save the human race. We're talking about really turning things around now. It's not one in which somebody's asking you to die for the cause or you to die for the cause. But unfortunately, many, many people, every child who starves every day is already dying. So who are we to complain about the fact that we might die when the truth of the matter is if we don't change things, we assuredly will, or our children or our children's children. Moses did not speak to the suffering of people. Jesus did not speak to the suffering of people. The Israelites were slaves. This is people suffering. Jesus was on the cross. This is people suffering. This is a grown-up story. Now you always talk about children's stories and Bible stories for children. It's really cool that children come to understand these stories. What we need now is some adult understanding of these stories. And when we do, and we really realize that Buddha under the Bodhi tree, being enlightened, the Israelites arriving in the promised land, and Jesus resurrecting, it's all the same story. It's the same journey. But the journey that matters now is not only your salvation, your resurrection, your deliverance to the promised land, but the entire species, the entire human race. And we are here, just like you can think of like Jesus went through therapy, we're in group therapy. That this, as the Course in Miracles says, just as his consciousness was purified and lifted as he became one with the Holy Spirit, the Course in Miracles says relationships are the assignments by which together we are going through a process of an evolution of consciousness. We heal one aha at a time. I hope that something that has been talked about tonight, these stories that are endlessly deep, these stories that penetrate on levels as deep as you allow them to penetrate. I hope that what we are talking about here tonight has provided even some element of aha. Because the great religious and spiritual truths are like a tincture, a tiny tincture of unlimited power. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. And God not only saves his people, that intentionality is not only built into the scheme of the universe, just like Moses always arrives, but he is asking us to be that. The Course in Miracles says we cannot save the world without God's help, but God cannot save the world without our help. And even to the point of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus, that we are not asked to ignore the crucifixion, we are asked to look at it, the Course says, but do not dwell on it. But he says, I cannot join with you in the crucifixion, join with me in the resurrection. Join with me in being and dwelling and remaining in a state of consciousness where it won't matter what they throw at us. And right now we are cowering. Right now we are cowering before all these horribly frightening forces on the planet because they seem to be telling us, you're threatened by terrorism, you're threatened by the possibility of nuclear war, you're threatened by environmental disaster. There's so many threats. Every day you pick up the newspaper, there's another potential threat. But the problem is not the threats. The problem is that we're cowering. As far as we can take it is hope. Moses didn't just hope, he lifted his rod. Jesus didn't just hope, he forgave, and he extended his perception beyond what he saw with his physical eyes to the innocence inside each and every human person. And to the extent to which we do that, the Course in Miracles says miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. So when you ask, what could I possibly do that would actually be part of the collective Christ consciousness, which is the true intervention and the true disruptor of the craziness and the insanity of our times, that you yourself might be a vessel of salvation. These words become so different. It's like, whoa, that's what that could mean? Then what happens is that miracles occur naturally in your presence. So I want to read to you this from the Course. This is Palm Sunday, the celebration of victory and the acceptance of the truth. Let us not spend this holy week brooding on the crucifixion of God's Son, but happily in the celebration of his release. So this week we celebrate that no matter what you've gone through and no matter what the world is going through, the potential, the possibility of infinite possibility exists. Like we need to open our imaginations, expand our imaginations. It could be different. Once again, salvation begins when you consider the possibility there might be another way. For Easter, it says, is the sign of peace, not pain. A slain Christ has no meaning, but a risen Christ becomes a symbol of the Son of God's forgiveness on himself, the sign he looks upon himself as healed and whole. So no matter what your problem, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you've ever gone through, remember, God is bigger than the problem. God's not saying, I'd love to help you, but your mother was an alcoholic, my hands are tied. No matter what you have been through, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter what anybody has done to you or what anyone thinks of you, you are the person God created you to be. And you are infinitely loving because love is what you are. You are infinitely innocent. That doesn't mean you haven't made mistakes. We all have. But as we atone for them, the level of the mistake, remember, is not the essence of who you are. As we remember that and seek to remember with everyone else that we know and interact with, that's true of them too. That other people are not their mistakes. They are the innocent child of God that God created them to be. And even if they've thrown some stuff at us that was aspect of crucifixion, that enabled us to learn things that we would not have known. And when we dwell within that space and make that what we're after, to be that person, to rise to the occasion, to put ourselves in service, that we might be leaders in the journey, that we might be miracle workers, knowing that that's not arrogant, that's humble, because it's a power in us but not of us, that will work through us, it will not be directed by us, but that to the extent to which we seek to forgive one another as the highest law, that things will happen on this planet, and we will stand for love, and we will not go along, we will not conspire, we will not accommodate with the policies of fear and hatred. We will take a stand with conviction for policies of love and justice. And as that happens, the Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it is shared. We don't need anything near a majority. We just need a critical mass, whatever that is on the planet. And then what will happen? And this can happen in our lifetime. I'm not saying that in our lifetime all war will cease or all hunger, all unnecessary hunger will cease. Maybe not. But enough can happen. Enough can happen if we allow ourselves to expand into the space of possibility within our own lives. That when we say the word hallelujah, we'll mean it. And when we say praise God, we'll mean it. And it won't be just because we saw the wonders that he did in Moses' life, or the Israelites' life, or in Jesus' life. We will see the wonders that happen in our lives. Even among traditional Christians, when they talk about the end days, if you look at the end days from a metaphysical perspective, it means the end of the ego's reign. And yes, it does say there will be awful things happening. Yeah, we got that. We've read the paper. But it also says there will be marvels and signs and wonders. And if we allow ourselves to open to the meaning of these holidays and say, yes, let that be done in me. I'm willing. Use me. Then those signs and wonders will not only be present within you, but they will be present in the lives of people around you because of who you are. And that's what we celebrate. That's what we celebrate. We celebrate that this is not just symbol, that this is not just metaphor, that this is a message from God to each and every one of us about the fact that we too will be delivered from the conditions of slavery to the conditions of freedom, that we too will be lifted by God above the cross, the crucifixions of our lives, to the resurrected state where all effects of the crucifixions are nullified, and we too, should we choose, will be part of a great evolutionary and revolutionary impulse of collective consciousness, whereby not just we as individuals, but the human race itself is taken off the cross of our own fear and insanity and delivered to a new possibility in this century and in this millennium. And if we even make the effort, whether we see all the consequences and results we'd like to see in our life or not, we will die with a smile on our face because we will know we kicked ass. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And so now we move into this sacred space within ourselves, knowing that God is not out there, God is closer to us than our own breath. And we dedicate and surrender ourselves to the work of God within us and through us. We have seen the suffering of people and animals, suffering of the earth itself. We have heard the call of God, and we, having heard the call to be teachers, to be ministers of God, to be miracle workers, not through any self-will or special talent, but simply through alignment with the love of God to the best of our ability. We say yes. In each of us, this takes a different form, as each of us within our own minds surrender in whatever way we feel moved to do. Bowing in our own way before the Spirit of God within us. No, we will not look away from the suffering of our people, the suffering of the world. And we know there is no miracle God will not perform to save His people. And to those who feel called to Jesus, we now take up the mantle of discipleship. Disciple and discipline emerging from the same roots. May our minds now be disciplined, that we not be tempted chronically and consistently by thoughts of fear, but rather be fortified by the Holy Spirit, illumined and guided and lifted up, that in any given moment we shall not lessen our dedication, but rather shall stand in the greatness that God created us to be, without apology, in grandeur, not grandiosity, and allow the Spirit of God to work through us on His behalf. And thus we ourselves shall be lifted above the cross of our own painful circumstances. We think of one person who symbolizes for us our own crucifixion. Someone whose behavior has caused us pain. Someone perhaps whose behavior in the world we deem as harmful to others. And now, whether that is one person or more than one person, in your mind's eye, now wash their feet. Humble yourself before them. For as you do, you will be miraculously and alchemically realigned with the truth of your relationship to God and to them. We now surrender to God our grievances towards anyone for any reason, that we shall no longer be slave to our own unforgiveness and negativity. We shall no longer be victims to our own sense of victimization. We shall no longer be crucified, but resurrected, no longer dwelling in the body of who we were, but now born into the body of light that is our inheritance as children of God. We shall seek to rise to the occasion. We shall atone for our mistakes. We shall seek to do justly by others and to practice mercy and forgiveness. We shall discipline ourselves to right action, right concentration, and right thought. And along with our brothers, our sisters everywhere all over the world, trying as we are, seeking as we are, failing on some days perhaps, but succeeding on many more, we shall rise together, and a great and glorious resurrective impulse, a new dawn, a new light, a new Easter time, a new passing over of the human race shall occur. For that is how good, and that is how powerful, and that is how glorious, and that is how unlimited God is. That there is no order of difficulty in miracles. God nullifies all fear, even unto death itself. And we now join with Jesus in resurrection. And know that as we utter in our hearts the word hallelujah, it is not just for what God has done in him and through him, but what God has done in us and shall do through us. Glory, hallelujah. praise God and many thanks from the depths of our souls, dear God, for how you have saved us from dark chapters in our lives and the miracles we know you will work through us as we surrender our lives to you. So it is that as we open our lives, subtle and not so subtle shifts shall have occurred within our minds, our bodies, our consciousness, our hearts. We shall not forget the moments we have spent aligned with the truths of God. And so it is. Together, we all say, Amen. I have one live stream question I'm going to do real quickly before we go down. Marianne, you've told me many times that upon waking in the morning, our minds are most open. That is the best time to pray, meditate, or work the course. For some time now, this woman says, the morning has been the most difficult for me. My ego tells me I am weak and fearful, and the world should be hidden from. I cannot find God's voice. How can I change this around? Well, my question to you, Lisa, is are you actually doing the workbook lessons in the Course? Now, for anybody who is new to this, the Course in Miracles does not claim any monopoly on truth. There's one truth spoken in many different ways. The Course is just one. You know, if it's for you, you know it. It doesn't claim to be for everyone. But if you, Lisa, are a student of the Course, the issue is to actually do the workbook in the morning. Now, one of the things it says in the introduction to the workbook that I love, it says, you might not like these ideas, you might not believe in these ideas, you might actively be hostile to them, just do them. Your not liking them will not decrease their efficacy in any way. So, I mean, that's the whole, anytime you do affirmations or whatever, by definition, you don't necessarily believe it, or you wouldn't be needing to affirm it. So, it's like physical exercise. If you do it, it works. 12 steps, whatever. Just shut up and do them, and life gets better. Okay, all right, let's talk about anything you want. Who's going first tonight? When you talk about the type of stuff we were talking about tonight, who has any questions? It's like, right? It's like jokes, recipes? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Stand up if it's comfortable for you, and then for people on live stream, yes.
Thank you. So I have a coworker that's making me crazy with her, you know, Nancy, we're all sinners. What do I say?
Well, first of all, whether or not you're supposed to say anything, I can't know. That's not for me to know, but we'll talk about how you find out. But let's talk about the metaphysics of that. So sin is an archery term. It means you missed the mark. Really, it's no different than the fact we'd all say everybody has a shadow. That's really all they're saying. They just say it in different language. We all say, we all have an ego. We all have a shadow. That's really what that person is saying. Now, they go a different place with it than we go. But in terms of we're all sinners, it's no different than our saying, well, we all know we still have an ego and we have the shadow self. It's really not any different. But then you talk about where that, usually somebody who says that, where their theology is going with it versus where something like the Course is going with it. So that person is usually saying, we are all sinners and we will be punished by God, and you will go to hell for your sins after you die. Okay, so this is what the Course says. God does not see you as a sinner who needs to be punished. God sees you as having made errors or mistakes that he seeks to correct. Hell is not after you die, it's like the next 15 minutes or so. The anxiety you feel, the depression you'll feel because you know you got it wrong. And that's what heaven is too. It's not after you die, it's an awareness of our oneness. So from a Course perspective, it's not that you sinned and so God's going to send you to hell. The Course in Miracles perspective is the ego, which is the loveless mind, and the only sin is loveless thinking. It's an archery term. It means you missed the mark. That is what sends you to hell. You feel awful about it. And God is that which delivers you from hell. So just know metaphysically that that's really, we're all sinners. It's really no different metaphysically than we realizing we all have egos. We're not enlightened masters yet. Now, although usually somebody who says that finds it offensive, the thought that anyone but Jesus is without sin. Whereas our perspective, he says in the Course in Miracles, I am not an ego-oriented teacher. I look forward to the day when you're up here with me, basically. He says that. Until you are, he says, look to me to guide you. And then once you already are with me, here we will remain as friends. So now, the next question is, what do you say to her? So this is the message of the Course in Miracles. The point is not what you say to her. The first relationship is with God. When we have our relationship with God clear, our relationship with other people becomes clear. So this is how it goes. Dear God, this woman, and she's probably a born-again Christian, and she thinks I'm a New Age nutcase, and she feels it's necessary for her to tell me that we're all sinners. And dear God, when this woman says this, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. Dear God, heal me of my judgment of her. That's the Course in Miracles. You feel judged by her, which she closes her heart to you, which then tempted you to close your heart to her, and then your mind is saying, I'm hurt by her, but really you can only be hurt by you. The Christ in you cannot be crucified. Your personality can be crucified. The Christ in you cannot. And that's why you pray and ask for help. It's like we say here all the time. If you say Jesus, so Jesus would be, it's the Course in Miracles would say, part of your problem-solving repertoire? Is he? Okay. So you would say to Jesus, I know that to you, she's fine. To me, she drives me crazy. She says it all the time, and she keeps saying, we're all sinners, with this holier thou thing, I don't understand spirituality, but she does, and it's driving me insane. But I know you're all perfect and enlightened, and you have said in the Course in Miracles, my mind joined with your mind can shine away the ego. And he says in the New Testament, I stand in the breach. That's what the breach, because, I'm sorry, what is your name? I know you.
Nancy.
Nancy, right. So the issue here is Nancy the Christ, which is your highest version of self, is not bothered by this woman, thinks she's cute. And the only reason this is happening is to show you the gap between you and the Nancy that you are on the earth to become. So you say to Jesus, I know, she doesn't bother you, but she bothers me. All right. And then he looks at her and he goes, I like her. And then you say, I am willing to not be triggered by her, but I can't get there with my conscious mind, but I am willing for you as my elder brother, because that's what he has been authorized by God to do. He is someone who has already achieved the state of enlightenment and has been authorized for those who wish to come into your mind and do the realignment for you.
Thank you.
So, dear God, I can't stand this woman. Help me. Yes.
I just want to start by saying thank you so much
because
in the early 90s, I first heard the words A Course in Miracles in your name in the same sentence, and you've been giving me spiritual kicks in the butt and hugs for many years, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so much of what you said tonight was so poignant.
Thank you.
My question really leads off of hers because, so much beauty in the Course about only what I'm not giving in a situation
can be lacking.
Is lacking.
And that's an example.
Seeing the Christ in my brother.
An example.
And then going back to your talk of laying down my rod and picking up my own power.
Right.
I get on a slippery slope there sometimes of seeing the Christ in others and then finding my rod on the ground.
Well, give me an example.
Maybe in situations where I should not really put my own power down and say, this probably isn't the best scenario for me. I love the Christ in you, wish you luck, but...
Are you afraid that doing that, because remember, Moses didn't say, we're going to stay in Egypt.
No, he
He
didn't.
said, we're leaving. So are you afraid that using your spiritual power will lead you to weakness rather than strength?
It does.
Well, it doesn't.
It has me.
It has not.
Oh.
There might be a confusion on your part about where strength lay. You never have to, love always gives the loving response. If you ask Spirit to direct your decision making, it will always be the loving response. But sometimes the loving response is no. Anybody who has a child knows that. Sometimes it would be the easiest thing to say, all right, just go to Debbie's for the weekend. But the loving thing is no. No, it would not be good for you to think you could not clean up your room, not do your homework all week, and go out this weekend. No, because I love you. And believe me, I would prefer you were gone this weekend. But love means no. So you never have to worry that love's going to make you a doormat. Love gives you the capacity to own your yes and to own your no. And like even though, when the rod was when the Israelites were victorious. So this notion of love making you namby-pamby or weak, that was not love. That might have been appetite, but not love. So when you say love has led you to put down your rod, theoretically, no, it never. These laws are unalterable. Now, is there a particular instance that we could look at that you'd like to, that you need to sort of unpack to see how that might be true?
I think I get the message, but
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I come from Puerto Rico, and I'm so happy to see you here. I hope you can come someday.
Did you say Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico,
Yeah, I've been
yes.
a couple of times. I'd like to
yeah,
go back.
well,
Yeah.
come back.
Thank you.
Please. I'll bring you.
Thank you.
Introduce you to some people. Well, anyway, Puerto Rico is having a hard time right now, as it is United States also. But there is a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of things that are going on. People are going into rage against each other. And I find myself with this media and Facebook and all that trying to go far from it and go away from it so I can keep my peace. But I feel that I am not serving them and I am not doing my part. How could I do that without getting so fed up with all that,
Okay.
everything that is happening?
Okay, so that's very much what we've been talking about here tonight.
Yes.
That's really what we're talking about. So you are in a room full of people where we've prayed together, and it's very difficult to lie to yourself when you've been praying with a group of people, just the residents in this room. The answers that are in you tonight, it's difficult to lie to yourself when you're in a group. And within this space, you feel like bringing up the suffering of people in Puerto Rico. That's your assignment. And you are living a life where basically you've escaped, right? So you are definitely living the story.
Well, the thing is that I feel that I'm escaping every day.
Right, well, you are escaping every day. And so you're saying, how can I be of help and not get involved? But that would be to me like saying during the AIDS crisis, oh, that person has sarcosis. You want me to go close to them? Ooh, these people are sick. I mean, we would see it as insane. Moses didn't ignore suffering people. And Jesus didn't ignore suffering people. He didn't ignore the leper. He didn't ignore those who came to him. So that is going back to what I was saying. You see this in our community like, oh, it's so toxic. Yeah. But if you're not dealing with it, you're not in your adulthood. We talk here about how it's sad when children don't get to experience their childhood. We're on the verge of not experiencing our adulthood. So the issue here is, as I said before, we are all assigned. So God would be saying to you, who are you to doubt my choice, that it be you? And secondly, we talked about this tonight. We talk about this all the time. Just as cells in the body are assigned, you'll be part of the brain. You'll be part of the pancreas. You'll be part of the lungs. You'll be African American or whatever country you happen to be from. You'll be from Puerto Rico. You'll be from Vienna. that we are assigned, your culture, your ethnicity, your birthplace, all that. It's like wherever you are, your job is to minister unto the suffering aspects or the loveless aspects in order to uplift the energy. So then you put yourself in God's service and you ask. So you say, dear God, I live in Manhattan. You live in Manhattan. But I have the restlessness that Buddha had, where he felt, I can't stay here in the castle wall, behind the castle walls of my father's compound. I must go out and address the suffering of people on the other side of the walls. I am being told, like Moses, yeah, you've escaped, and now you have to go back. And then you say, dear God, I don't even know, and in your case, it's a little, I feel I'm too weak. I don't have what it takes. And we have got to get over that. When I think of the AIDS crisis, you just show up for people. You know, half of it is just showing up. We get into our heads, well, I don't know what to do and I don't know how to feel. Well, you'll probably cry some. What will that mean? You're an adult who's really a feeling person. Let your sensitivity help you. And so now the only question is, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go back there? Do you want me to not go back there? What do you want me to do? Because you're being shown that Puerto Rico is in trouble and you are a daughter of Puerto Rico. And you are a daughter of God. You are a daughter of Puerto Rico. You know, whatever your color, whatever your ethnicity, whatever your culture, you are a daughter of God standing with them. And the only question is, dear God, use me. When that becomes your question, things will be happening. Things will be happening. You'll read an article. Somebody will call you. You know, you said to me you'd like me to go to Puerto Rico. Maybe you're being called to Puerto Rico. Or maybe you're going to call, maybe you and I are going to Puerto Rico. Who knows? Just put yourself in service. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I am in Puerto Rico. It's interesting the way that you say you are not from Puerto Rico. That's the way I feel. I feel like I am from there. Everything is happening around me. And is so crumbling around me, and I fear that I don't want to get all involved in this because I feel, you know, that.
Okay, you live there or you live here?
I live in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so many years ago, I said to my mother when we were founding an organization to help people with AIDS, and we did it here too, Manhattan Center for Living, LA Center for Living, and I remember saying to my mother, I don't know if I want to do this. And she said, well, okay, what would be the downside? And I said, well, if we start this, then I think it will really mean that I have to be in LA for the next 5 years. Because it would be wrong of me to start this and then not stay here. You know, I would be needed. And I never forgot my mother's response. It was, I feel sorry for your generation, that you are so loath to be needed. Like, ooh, I must not be needed. You're afraid of the immersion that is your salvation. You will find the meaning of your life. You will find that we are obsessed with the ultimately meaningless in this culture. We're always trying to resist deep meaning. And part of deep meaning is there will probably be some tears. Hello. There will probably be some hard days and nights, but what is that compared to the hard days of nights of this nagging suspicion that you're wasting your life? That's what we should be afraid of. What we should be afraid of is one day knowing I might have helped. Yes, ma'am.
I have a friend who is an addict, and they have no interest in recovery. So how do I go about that?
Just pray for that person. I mean, if you feel that this person is an addict, and first of all, it's a self-diagnosed disease. But if it's a person that you can see is causing himself and those around him or herself and those around her problems, and are there other people in his or her life feeling the same way, and you guys know each other?
Yeah.
Okay, are you at a point where a conversation of intervention has been brought up, or is it just one of those things where you're just watching somebody go through this and you know that they won't do anything about it? Which is it?
Well, they've been to rehab a few times.
Pray for that person. What is that person? You want to give us a name? You don't have.
No.
Okay. But that God knows who that person is. So let's pray for that person right now, okay? Dear God, there are many forms of bondage. And one of them is addiction. Alcohol, drugs, whatever. And this woman has mentioned a person, and we know, dear God, that you know who they are. But we know that you know who every suffering addict is. In this room, listening right now, or someone that we know of and think of at this time. And we pray, dear God, that you put your hand upon them. And put your hand upon the person that this woman has mentioned. This person has gone to rehab. This person has tried. This person needs a miracle. And please that work that miracle in their life and in the lives of all so suffering. And so it is. Together we all say, amen. Anybody else? Yes. This gentleman here and then that lady back there. Could somebody, Jennifer, would you get me some water, please? Sure. Oh, thank you, honey.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Have you ever read Harold Bloom's book?
Pardon?
Harold Bloom. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, I know Harold Bloom. And
He
what is
wrote
the
the
book?
about inventing the human, Shakespeare, about Shakespeare. He was a Shakespeare expert, and he wrote a book about how Shakespeare essentially invented the personalities that we all have through his art, that we watched it so well, and that the stories were so real that these characters helped to influence our personalities. I would like to share with you that in many ways, you are Shakespeare to so many of us, and myself included. Your books have helped really write my personality and shaped who and what I am, and I just want to thank you so much for the effort.
Well, I thank you so much. I think of myself more as a person who maybe gives a really good book report on what Shakespeare did. But
Fair enough.
Thank you.
I kind of, the way that he speaks and knows, and that book meant a lot to me as I worked through things, but anyway.
Well, the bottomless genius of someone like Shakespeare is so amazing. So I know what you mean, that there have been those who have articulated the archetypes of humanity. I don't think it's going too far for that to be said about him. So if I have in any way contributed to your journey of understanding, I'm grateful.
Genuinely,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have the great responsibility of being a leader at the job that I work, and I take it incredibly seriously. I'm the oldest in my family, and I take that responsibility very seriously. As my folks grow older and my dad's passed, a lot of stuff sort of landed on me. And I'm kind of tired in a way that, like, I just can't help but feel honestly. Okay. So I've watched you as many times as I can, and it's funny because I can see the times where you're speaking and it really, like, it almost means more when it feels like there's an added effort through all the traveling you do and the things that you say. So when you're at a point where you're just kind of tired, where and how do you remain influential? How do you, physically, like, where do you find the will?
Okay, so let's talk about the metaphysical principle there in terms of the Course. So first of all, I remember hearing a tape many years ago by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I remember being so moved by it because she challenged the whole notion of burnout by saying that if you're burned out, that must mean you think this is about you. We talk here all the time. In fact, the Course in Miracles says the presence of fear is a sure sign you're trusting in your own strength. And I say here often, you're not the water, you're just the faucet. You're not a big deal. This is not something you're doing. And to the extent to which you think you're doing something, you're actually interrupting how much God can do through you. So on a human level, I think like any conscious person, there are issues of taking care of oneself, self-care, how you eat, sleep, the things that you can do, exercise, and so forth. But beyond that, and on a much bigger level, it's about realizing that it's not about you. That is the issue here, that the Course in Miracles says all sickness comes from if you think that you are a body. The Course in Miracles says enlightenment is a shift from body identification to spirit identification. And that when you identify with the body rather than the spirit, this puts a stress on the body that the body was not meant to carry, and that causes sickness. So more than anything, in this area, as in every area, my life works pretty well when I practice what I preach. And when you do practice that principle, that the Course in Miracles says the body heals when you're not looking at it. So the more conscious time you spend away from the consciousness of making it about you, the more spirit can work through you. And then within that, you are led to more healthy living and, reasonable self-care on the mortal plane. And as I get older, I notice that I need more rest, time to take care of self, and that's reasonable. So for you, the fact that you have what you were talking about, leadership, and you do take it seriously. You take your responsibility to your family seriously. You take responsibility to your company or your business, whatever you're doing, seriously. And part of why do people make mistakes? People make mistakes and do things that undercut their leadership or undercut their responsible action or whatever. By moving too fast, you didn't meditate that morning. You didn't replenish yourself with meditation and prayer. You didn't replenish yourself with all the things that we talk about here. The things that we talk about affect not only the psyche, but affect the body as well. Does that make sense?
100%. I appreciate your help.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Gracia. And I feel so happy that everybody's here. I mean, I was so moved. We were moved, weren't we? Yeah, look at these faces. And so I wanted you to know that you asked me, I'll speak for myself, you asked me to remember the human race. And if you want to say anything more about that, I'd love to hear it. Sometimes I feel you said just now, oh, you're out of touch with God, Goddess, because you're afraid. Oh, I want to be in a loving partnership while the world is turning in this way. So it's not guilt. I can go with that in a loving way. And if you want to say anything about that, I'd love to hear it.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about a loving partnership. There's nothing about what we're talking about here that should make you think that you shouldn't want a loving partnership. It's just that you would want to see, it goes back to the adultery thing, that you would want a loving partnership so that together you could serve the world more beautifully. Now, that's really interesting, because think about that. If you have a consciousness that says, I want a loving partner, and we've talked about this a lot, people go into therapy and the therapist says, is this relationship giving you everything you need, rather than the therapist saying, are you giving everything you have? So the Course in Miracles is not anti-partnership, it's all about relationship. But it's about what is the purpose. So if you were saying, I want a loving partnership so that together we could serve the world more fully, that it may, like in my wedding ceremony in Illuminata, that there's all this language about, may I be a space in the presence of which he becomes more fully the man he is capable of being. And the man, may I become a space in which she is more fully able to relax into the essence of herself and become who she's capable of being, or the man and the man, the woman, whatever. Now, think about this, guys, because this is such a potent example. We're living at a time where there's some really dark stuff happening within the romantic area. some really seriously sociopathic, disconnected, the ghosting, the addiction, the avoidance, the commitment phobes, all that stuff, and some real psychic pain going on. But from A Course in Miracles perspective, none of us should be surprised at that, because we're not contextualizing romantic partnership within a sacred context. It's all just over-casualization of sex, and I'm the generation that introduced that, so it's not like, I don't get it, but we were wrong. And there's a lot of pain that comes from that. So it's not like you wouldn't want a romantic partnership, but you would say, I want a romantic partnership if it would serve the cause of enlightenment on the planet. Now, what that means is, because you had proclaimed the light, the darkness can't get in. So let's say a woman has said, may I be in a relationship where this would help me become the woman that I'm capable of being more fully so that I can serve the world more. Then when you come in contact with a man who undercuts you, whatever his issues are, you are more likely to be able to break that chain, because you've already said what you want. You've already said that you want the sacred, and that which is not sacred, if you do not, we've talked about this here before, if you do not proactively serve the light, that energy, the psychic energy that does not go to service of God or love, is given over to neurotic appetite. The Course says you can misuse your mind, but you cannot diminish its power. And that's what the malignancy is. It's all about appetite. And it's not just sexual appetite, it's the emotional appetite, the psychological appetite, all the stuff that we have in the control games and the avoidance games. It's really sick and dark, and it's holding people down. But if instead the sacred context, and I'm not suggesting we go back 40 or 50 years, I'm not, or even longer, but it's not, a lot of people used to get married in church or get married in synagogue, because it was kind of understood, at least subconsciously, that once this bond was created, all kinds of stuff was going to happen psychically, and best to put it within a sacred container. So it's not like we're, and also, this is not about sacrifice. Anybody who's been in a happy partnership knows there's no joy like it. You have more energy. When things are working well in that energy, it's not like it takes away from your work on the planet. It just fuels your work on the planet. But the dark stuff that's so prevalent these days pulls you down. So it's not like, therefore, I will avoid partnership. It's rather, may partnership, if it is here, be that which lifts us both to a higher place for the purposes of the enlightenment of the world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Wanted to make sure all the girls here would just leave.
And Marianne, I'll just use the word condensed energy instead of dark, just for me.
Pardon?
I'll use the word condensed and constricted energy. That's what's out instead of dark for me.
Well, that's, language, but yes. Did you have something to say, ma'am? Anybody else? Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
And throughout this entire journey here, you said a few things that really resonated with me. That we are all special and no one is special.
Yes, that's the line of the Course. All of the children of God are special, and none of the children of God are special.
So no one is chosen, or it's either you...
No one's what?
No one is chosen.
Chosen? Well, as I mentioned tonight, the Course in Miracles says, many are called, but few are chosen, means everyone is called, but few care to listen.
And I felt really called for to really embody love lately, because I'm going through a very difficult situation while I'm supposed to be living a life of elation.
You know what, sir? I'm having a hard time hearing you, so I'm going to go walk over there, okay? Sorry. No, thank you, though. Okay, now you feel called...
to embody love.
Yes, and that's what we're all called to embody love, okay?
And while in a situation where you're dealing with somebody that does not want love.
Okay.
And I saw you praying for others here. And if we are not special and we don't want to be prayed for, how can the prayer have an impact on us?
So this person, first of all, when you say this person doesn't want love, is it that this person doesn't want love, or they don't want love in the form that you would like to give it?
More than that.
Or the
Addictive
last
behaviors,
Yeah.
destructive behaviors.
So you're praying for someone, you don't have to get their permission.
So how would the prayer impact that person?
Well, the Course in Miracles says a prayer is the medium of miracles, and all minds are joined. So the Course in Miracles says, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did with that water. I'm sorry. So the Course in Miracles says, when you work a miracle, and prayer is the medium of miracles, it affects situations in ways that you have no idea. And it says in the Course, do not ask how this happens, because it is beyond your understanding. It is, your mortal mind cannot understand how this works.
Okay. What about karma?
Karma?
Karma, the study of karma tells you you create your own karma. And if your own karma is you're doing things that are vindictive.
That are what?
Vindictive.
Yes.
How can that person clean their karma with prayer?
Okay. So Buddha was born about 500 years before Jesus. And he articulated karma, action, reaction, action, reaction. In the Course in Miracles, it's called the law of cause and effect. But Jesus then says, but in a moment of grace, all karma is burned, which is basically what Buddha says as well. You do create your karma in that. If I treat you unkindly, either you or somebody else is going to treat me unkindly. However, in a moment of grace, of atonement, where I recognize what I've done to you or to the next person, maybe I won't realize it till it happens with the next person, but it will include making amends to you as well, right? Then all that gets burned. Because the universe is ready to start again at any moment. You don't have to bring the past with you. But you do bring the past with you if you have not cleaned up on a causal level your mistakes. So if I make a mistake on the level of cause, I do something loveless, I will not be able to enter into the next moment without carrying that baggage, because the law of cause and effect is inviolable. So even in the next moment, I'm still going to reap the consequences of the cause that I generated in the past. But in any given moment in the present, we are given through the power of the atonement, through atoning for our mistakes. And this is, the Catholics do it with confession. The Jews do it with the day of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. AA, it's about taking the fearless moral inventory, admitting the exact nature of your character defects. Any serious spiritual path includes that. Recognizing where you are generating effects because you have not stopped the unloving thought or behavior on the level of cause. But atonement, and that's everything in the Course in Miracles, atonement, when in page 90 in the text, where you actually go back to that moment where you made that mistake. And you realize that if I was loveless in that moment, I was not letting God work through me, but I can choose again. And you atone, and you seek to be better now. I mean, that's the thing, guys. We all have places where we've made mistakes, but talk about archetypes. It's like the prodigal son, the father more excited to see the son who left and came back than the son who had never left. I see this in my life, and I'm sure we all do, places where I'm actually, I used to get it wrong, but now that I get it right, I'm actually better than I was before I got it wrong, right? Because when you've hurt yourself or hurt someone else, you become humble in that place and kind of more conscious around it. Does that make sense? And then you have situations in life where you wonder, you end up talking to someone who's about to make that mistake, and you can share from your experience, and maybe they won't make that mistake. And it's one of the ways, maybe I guess it's good I made that mistake because of what I learned, because who else would have talked to them? And it's so amazing how the universe uses everything. Does that make sense?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are amazing.
Thank you. Takes one to know one.
I would just love a prayer, actually, because I think you answered everything, and I've followed you since the early 90s. You really are. It's such a blessing to be in your company.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I would love a prayer for I'm raising a 14-year-old, and she's my stepdaughter. I imagine a lot of people raising 14-year-olds is already a little bit, tense.
I was there once.
And her mother has kind of checked out on her, so she's in my care, and I would love a prayer for her. Her name is Chloe, and I would love a prayer for me so I can be my best with her too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
She's Chloe?
Her name is Chloe,
And your name is?
my name is Tracy.
You know, we've talked about this, people who are the volunteers and team. This is such a, and of course, Andrea, you and I, of course, we should do like a Sunday afternoon on this, shouldn't we? Should we do it just talking to parents or having parents and the teens together? Well, how do we do that? Pardon, one with parents only, and then have the kids come after that? Same day? Sure. We need to do that. So we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, of course, we will pray with you. Okay, anybody else before we go tonight? Anybody else have anything? Okay, it's late, so I'm going to ask you to real quickly get to the chase on the question. I'm going to real quickly get to the chase on the answer. Yes, ma'am.
I've had many people in my life suffer from depression.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know, how can we apply the Course of Miracles to those people that are really suffering from severe depression? And what's your take on people being prescribed a lot of medications?
I have some very intense
For that.
feelings about that. I hope, Jennifer, will you get her my book, Tears to Triumph? The Course in Miracles, which is about this topic. The Course in Miracles says that a life lived outside the circle of love is depressing. And I said earlier, if you're not depressed, what, you're not looking? If you're looking at the state of the world today and you're not depressed, you're checked out. And the answer is not to desensitize yourself to check out further. There is a normal spectrum of human suffering. It is not a mental disease. But what has happened over the last few years is that human suffering, even within a normal spectrum, has been turned into a multi-billion-dollar profit center by the pharmaceutical, pharmacological, industrial complex. And it is naive to think otherwise. So that today, people who are not mentally ill are being prescribed antidepressants for situations that would be depressing to any normal human being. Going through a divorce, a heartbreak, the end of a relationship, financial failure, bankruptcy, the death of a loved one. These are very painful situations. They are not mental illness. Many people do not realize, for instance, the FDA has issued a black box warning. For people under 25 years, 25 and younger, antidepressants actually increase. They do not decrease the incidence of suicidal ideation. Abilify, for instance, you see these ads on television. Maybe your first antidepressant is not helping enough. Try Abilify. Abilify is an antipsychotic drug. These are particularly prescribed mostly to women, and the last thing American women need now is to be given one more reason to think there's something wrong with you. The fact that we're so sensitive, the fact that we're so sensitive and in such pain is because we know something's wrong. That's why. If your leg is broken, it is a survival mechanism that the brain registers pain, because it is assigned to reset the bone. Same with psychic pain. Don't buffer yourself from your psychic pain, address it. And then address it in these ways that we are talking about. The human race would not have survived and thrived were we not imbued with an immune system. This is why a compromised immune system is so dangerous. In a healthy immune system, there is an amazing amount of assault and injury that a human body can take. And the immune system can absorb it. Same with psychic pain. We have a psychic immune system as well. And that's what my book, Tears to Triumph, recommends. So this is not to minimize deep depression, but it is to resist, however, the medicalization, the medical model that has been imposed upon it. You know, this phrase, clinical depression. There is no blood test for depression, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like leukemia or diabetes. It means somebody in a clinic said you're very depressed, and you probably knew that already. So one of the reasons we talk about this quite a bit here, of the role of the issue of suffering, the great religious and spiritual teachings. It was that Buddha saw suffering. It's that the Jews were suffering. It's that Jesus suffered on the cross. So that's what depression is. It is the suffering that exists when the human mind has been so knocked out of its center. Does that make sense? Now, having said that, I want to do the caveat. Please be very aware, these are addictive drugs. That usually is not told people. The last thing, anything I say, please, if you are on them or anyone watching is on them, and if this conversation leads you to think maybe it's not such a good idea, please do not throw them in the toilet tonight or the trash can. This must be very carefully done with great consideration and even medical supervision how you get off them. That's one more thing I'll say about that, is about the United States as opposed to other European countries. One of the things that you hear a lot, and a lot of the people who are prescribing antidepressants are not mental health care professionals. Mainly they're prescribed by someone's gynecologist. These are not people who are experts in this particular thing. One of the things you hear a lot in the United States that you do not hear in other countries, why is this? Hello, this is a market-based rather than a universal healthcare system. In a universal healthcare system, let's say England, the financial investment is to not have you take pills if you do not need them. So there is more of the model of take them if you need them for a while. Whereas here you hear way too often, expect to be on these for the rest of your life. And some of these people, particularly being put on them so young, and years later, then you're in trouble. Then you're in trouble. Addictive. And just one last comment. We do not know. It is amazing how much is said that really, when you get down to it, they do not know, the research is not in, about the blood-brain barrier in pregnant women. And some of the things that are happening with babies, with autism, etc. Some of the theories have to do with this. Some of the ways women who are pregnant are being told, oh, it's okay, that doesn't go through the blood-brain barrier. You know, I really don't understand it. Because I know people in today's world who look on every package, God forbid you should put gluten in your gut. The things, the chemicals you would never put in your gut, but for whatever reason don't have a concern with putting them in your brain. So it's a very important conversation. Although, once again, please do not act in some crazy way. Now, in terms of the spiritual issue on that, so my point would be to this lady, a serious spiritual path, and that's what I talk about in that book. You know, traditionally, human suffering was the purview of religion. If this were hundreds of years ago, where did you go with your suffering? To your priest, to your minister, to your rabbi, to your imam. What started happening with the introduction of psychotherapy, the traditional model of psychotherapy about 100 years ago, is that the baton was handed from clergy to psychotherapy. And when that stopped working, it just got handed over the last few years so quick. You looked away, you came back, what just happened? It's been handed to the psychopharmacologist. And can we at least be sober and adult enough to have the conversation? Okay, all right. Thank you very, 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 very much. Let's say a prayer. Thank you. So that, you know, when people talk about suffering, as we do here, anybody who would say, you know, that those of us talking about antidepressants and stuff, one gentleman said, Ms. Williamsson, stay in your lane. I said, sir, you're in my lane. Let's pray. And God willing, as my mother would say, I'll be here next Tuesday night. Thank you, and thank all of you watching on a live stream. Dear God, as we leave each other's presence tonight, we take this moment to pray for each other. We send our love and our goodwill to all who are joined with us in this conversation and embrace of God's love. And now together, we send our love to all the world. We pray for James and we pray for Alice. We pray for Gabby, for Brenda, and for Jamie. We pray for Vinny, for Lauren, and for Amy. We know, dear God, that you know everyone who needs a miracle. And we open our hearts and pray that it is so. And now go forth in confidence and go forth in peace. For there are angels to your left and there are angels to your right. There are angels in front of you and angels behind you. There are angels above you and angels below. We pray tonight, dear God, there's so much going on in the world, in Syria, North Korea, Russia, the United States, Israel, the Palestinian territories. We know that you know, dear God, all the places where hearts need to be awakened. And may it be so. And now as we seek to stand within the light, remember that God himself has paved a path for your life. Everything has been chosen, all the people, everything is already done. Seek merely to walk in the light of his love in any given moment. And if at any moment you feel fear or confusion, reach out your hand as would a little child seeking the guidance of an elder brother. For he will take your hand and put you back on the path and accompany you as you walk it. This is no idle fantasy. He is here. And so it is. Together, we all say, amen. God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Love you guys. See you next week.